And that's good news for Republicans and indeed for the country. Tax reform, a big issue for everybody. Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. And we're having a forum tonight at Cyberg's, FM News Talk 97.1, my radio station, and a bunch of great people from all different walks of life in terms of tax policy and common sense policy. Adam Michel, he's a tax policy analyst with the Great Heritage Foundation. And of course, David McIntosh, he's the president of the world-famous Club for Growth. You all have done some great work on behalf of common sense policies, conservative and otherwise. And before we get to actually strategy as it relates to 2018 going forward with the Club for Growth, let's talk about some myths. Let's blow some myths out of the water regarding tax reform. First of all, the idea, and we think that Claire McCaskill is going to try to carry this into 2018 if she doesn't vote for it, which is likely she won't, that somehow this is a tax break for the wealthy. Who wants to take that one first?
Go ahead, Ed.
This myth keeps getting perpetuated and getting trotted out, but when you actually go and look at the legislative text, it makes you wonder whether these folks have even read what's going on there. The Republicans have bent over backwards to not make this a tax cut for the rich, and I prefer they do lower taxes for everyone, but in this bill, at least in the House version, they don't even lower that top marginal rate. They actually add in an additional rate. The Senate bill only lowers that top rate on rich folks just a little bit, down from the high 39.6% it is today. So it's really a myth that this is just a giveaway for the wealthy. This is a middle-class tax cut.
Well, and there are a lot of us who don't believe it goes far enough in giving tax breaks to the wealthy.
Well, you're right, Jamie. And the reason is those are the tax cuts that will enable the economy to grow faster, create more jobs. The CEA predicts that $4,000 a year higher pay checks for people. So the middle class, not only every middle class working family will pay less taxes after this bill, but in addition to that, they'll have more job opportunities, they'll get higher take-home pay, and they'll see their lives return to a more prosperous America where their kids have a chance to have a better future.
Now, on top of that also, though, it appears we're expanding the number of people who aren't paying taxes at all, correct?
Yes, it does do that. I think everybody should put in a little to be part of the country supporting our government, but they are. At the lower end, they've expanded the number of people who won't even pay any taxes.
Yeah, and that's the problem with, I think, in terms of our electorate, is we are creating more people who don't have to care. And that's not much fun.
And it shouldn't be a big burden, but frankly, everybody should put in a little bit to make sure our government works, our Army and Navy and Air Force can defend ourselves. I mean, $100, something to contribute to our country.
Tell us about deficit neutrality. We've talked about this a lot, and a lot of us are concerned more about whether or not it's going to be adjacent to spending cuts. So we would like it to be spending neutral as opposed to deficit neutral. But in the end, when it comes to the deficit and these attempts to create some kind of trigger that would increase the taxes if there was some sign that this was going to be adding to the deficit, what do you make of that? Because there are some people who want that trigger in there.
Yeah.
When it comes to tax revenue, we know that we already bring in enough to cover the functions of the government. The tax revenue as a percentage of GDP has been climbing over the last couple of years, so spending is the problem. So if we're worried about the deficit and debt, we should be talking about how to reform spending. The tax cut bill in front of us doesn't reduce revenue by all that much. When you add in the economic growth, just maybe 1% reduction in tax revenue coming in. And so when we look at all the things the government spends money on that they shouldn't be, that's where the problem is, and that's where deficit hawks should focus going forward.
Adam's exactly right. In addition, this is one of those pernicious ideas coming out of Washington where they're setting up a precedent that taxes will go up in the future without a vote. And frankly, we won the Revolutionary War against the British, say no representation, no taxes.
Right.
And so these guys should never be allowed to put that kind of automatic trigger in where people's taxes will go up in the future with nobody voting for it and nobody to hold accountable. I think it's a terrible idea and needs to be defeated.
It's kind of odd. I know that Republicans are the ones who actually wanted that trigger in there, but it's kind of odd that we don't have a situation where maybe we ought to trigger cuts in spending.
So that'd be much better.
Yeah, a spending cut trigger in a sense.
One of the biggest ironies, Jamie, is they're thinking about putting this trigger for tax increases in, and then 2 weeks from now they're talking about avoiding the trigger they put in for spending cuts.
Yeah.
So, if they're going to be really concerned about the deficit, they need to cut the spending.
I go back and forth with a more liberal person who's on the show. His name is Mark Kaysen, and we fight on Fridays. It's a Friday night fight. And he's a good guy, but he has a different outlook on things. And he keeps on telling me that this idea somehow that more receipts to the government in the formulation of expanded growth will actually be what reduces the deficit. And it worked with Ronald Reagan. Stephen Moore is a big advocate of this philosophy. Is it true?
I served in the 90s with Newt Gingrich, and we held the line on spending. We didn't really cut much. We just held the line. But when we cut taxes, the receipts went way up, and we actually balanced the budget for the first time in 40 years. So your friend's exactly right. If you cut taxes and the economy grows, we'll be much more likely to balance the budget.
Right. Well, actually, I need to correct that. He's actually wrong. He was the one who said
he
doesn't work.
Got it wrong.
Right. I want to make sure, because you tell Mark Kaysen that, David, and the wheel of Kaysen will be...
The idea is right. You cut taxes, and the budget will be more likely to balance.
Good. Mark. Just telling you right now. I'll play the soundbite for him, by the way. Well, both of you, thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you tonight. And, of course, folks, I want you to pay attention to the Heritage Foundation and the Club for Growth. These guys are doing great work. They have plenty of resources online for you to kind of arm yourself with information as you talk to your peers, as you talk to your elected representatives. It's all about getting out there and evangelizing for common sense. Both of you doing great work in that sense.
Let me put in a plug for Adam. Yeah. He has a chart on their website that I went to look at all the different provisions in the various bills. Anybody who wants to know what this tax cut bill looks like, go to see Adam's chart on the Heritage website.
That way you won't get some things wrong, right, Adam?
Yeah, there's so many moving pieces right now that we need to keep track of what the different bills do and which one is better, frankly.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it very much. Good to see you again. All right. Coming up next, I'm going to get yelled at by a nun.